Welcome everybody to the TA Tech Teardown. Delighted to be joined by BrightHire today. If this is the first time you've been part of a TA Tech Teardown webinar, the concept behind it is that the TA industry is constantly evolving. There's constant changes, and particularly from a technology standpoint, over the last few years, there's been massive developments, and it's really hard for professionals like you, like me, to keep on top of what tools are out there, what tools you should be using. And when you do see tools, often you'll have to go down a sales process. So the idea of the TA Tech Teardown series is that we do the research for you. We bring you the best tools in the market for you to have a look at. There's interactive demos. There's an opportunity to ask questions of the leaders of these companies without having to go through that sales process. With that in mind, please ensure that throughout this session you are asking questions. The idea is that it's interactive. I'll be asking questions. I'm sure Jeff, Teddy may be asking questions as well. But we want to make sure that you as viewers get the most out of this, and we want it to be interactive. So please ensure throughout the webinar that you're asking questions, and we'll ensure that they're all answered. So as I said, today's guest company is BrightHire. It's an AI co-pilot that aims to transform the quality of hire within your organization. And we're chatting with their co-founder, Teddy, to get his take on why TA teams should all be using BrightHire. And we're also joined by Jeff, who's the head of recruiting at Abnormal Security, and is an avid BrightHire user. And he'll be able to provide his insights of, the experience of using the platform, as well as the top tips on how you can implement BrightHire and how you get the best out of it as a platform. So I guess over to you two to do some quick intros, and then Teddy, if you want to take us into a bit of the BrightHire journey and the product demo, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and thanks for having us. Thank you to the Hire community for creating this forum for us to share a bit. Jeff, thank you for being a BrightHire customer and a friend, and for showing up early morning on the West Coast. And yeah, my name's Teddy Chestnut. I'm one of the co-founders of BrightHire. We're the leading interview intelligence platform. We just had our 5-year-old birthday this past week, which is super fun to celebrate. And yeah, I'm excited to share a bit more about how we're helping teams transform the quality of hire, do more with less. And I'm going to hopefully spin through the product quickly and give most of the opportunity to Jeff, because you probably want to hear more from him than me about how he's putting it to work. But yeah, Jeff, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, I'm doing your dirty work already, right? Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Jeff Barker, I'm Global Head of Recruiting at Abnormal Security. Been here about 2 years and am based out of Portland, Oregon. And yeah, I've been using BrightHire almost, Teddy, you could keep me honest on this, I think almost the whole 2 years I've been at Abnormal.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a big fan, and a lot of great lessons learned, a lot of value gleaned from it, and happy to share kind of that journey.
Awesome. Not lost on me that we have somebody's AI note taker joining this conversation. The world's transformed a lot in the last.
I saw that.
Pretty well. So cool, Ben, if it's cool with you, I'll spin through like maybe a few slides to give the context on like why BrightHire exists, the problems that we solve. I'll spin through the product. Jeff, you can chime in along the way, but then I'll try to do the whiz bang and then hand it over to Jeff. You can tell some customer stories and we can open up for questions.
Perfect.
That sounds great.
Sounds great. We started BrightHire because every TA team that we ever talked to was trying to do 2 things at once, walk and chew gum, like do more with less and raise the bar at the same exact time. And that felt like, okay, we got to increase capacity without adding more headcount. We got to build for scale. We got to save time. Oh, but we also got to like assess really thoroughly and consistently and deliver an exceptional and equitable experience in the entire hiring process, right? This is the most important process that we build in our whole company, full stop. We have to get it right, but we got to do it with few resources. And the problem statement that we heard again and again and again from heads of talent acquisition was this, that there's a whole part of the process that wasn't necessarily within their control, the interview process, that if we have gaps in, if those conversations are unstructured, if we're not getting complete feedback, if we're chasing down hiring managers, if the teams aren't aligned, and certainly if we don't have visibility to control, that throws a wrench in the whole process. Like it gets in the way of quality, it gets in the way of speed, and it increases risk. And so we've been building technology to try to help TA leaders take control of this part of the process and kind of elevate it. We've been doing that with great companies kind of globally, from a couple hundred to several thousand, 10,000 around the world. And it's been an amazing journey over the last 5 years, kind of building with companies like these. And the platform that I'll spin you through live, but just to orient, is really an end-to-end platform for hiring excellence that starts in the planning process with a set of AI tools to help recruiters and hiring managers kick off a role in the right direction, create job descriptions, optimize them, and turn those JDs into structured interview plans, and then picks up in the actual interview process with a co-pilot that guides recruiters and interviewers through the interview, like here's the right questions to ask, records and transcribes those interviews, and creates a set of AI notes and highlights that we can review, share, collaborate around to make better decisions, and then insights and training that TA leaders like Jeff can use to up-level the whole team. And we build, you'll see this through the demo, but we really build this directly into the systems that teams use today. It's one of the core product principles. So deep integrations into the ATS platforms, into the video platforms, the calling platforms that teams use today. So that's us at a very, very high level, kind of what we solve for and the platform. To jump into it, let's say that I'm a recruiter working with a hiring manager to kick off a role. I might run that intake call on BrightHire. So have BrightHire join that intake call on Zoom or Google Meet, record it, transcribe it, and deliver a set of AI notes about that intake call, the scope of the role, the required consultant experience, the logistics, the sourcing strategy, how we sell the opportunity that we can then hold on to, share across the team, and really make sure that we're kicking this role off in the right direction. I can then jump into BrightHire Plan, and I can use our AI co-pilot, starting with just a job title, enter in a bit of information, and then really have a back and forth, in this case, for a QA automation engineer role, guided through like, hey, what are some of the responsibilities for this role? And I can select and choose and edit, and the AI is going to help me actually define what I'm looking for in this role and literally help me write the job description, responsibility by responsibility, or requirements and skills along the way. And so for teams that either put hiring managers in control of this, like they put work on hiring managers, let's make it a lot easier. For recruiters that have to take this work on themselves, let's make it easier for them too. And let's make sure that every single role kind of starts with a very structured, skill and competency-oriented JD to kick off from. Right? So I won't go through the whole thing here, but you can see how we're kind of building this along the way. We can do the same thing for requirements and skills. And where we land is a job description that might look like this in our job description optimizer. So now we're scanning this job description for length, readability, compliance, potentially biased language. Of course, if you've used our creator, it's going to come out looking great. You can take one that you've written yourself, right, and plug it in here and then optimize it over time. And then with a single click, take this job description, extract out the relevant skills, competencies, attributes we want to test for, say, I want to run 5 interviews for this role, and get a fully structured interview plan. So a recruiter screen, a hiring manager screen, in this case, a technical interview with a QA team member, and literally see a set of screening questions, technical, behavioral, situational questions that all come back to how we might evaluate for this role. So let's kick this role off in the right direction. Then we can take that and we can bring it right into your ATS. So for example, if you're using Greenhouse, if I'm starting on building an interview kit, right? We have a Chrome extension, pulls that whole interview directly into the workflow, and I can take that hiring manager screen that I was just working on and create my whole interview kit right in Greenhouse. Works very similar like in Ashby, or the same kind of setup there. And so now I'm building that structure in the system of record, this the source of truth. And now we go run that interview. We schedule this interview, right? We sync on the back end to Greenhouse and Ashby and iSIMS of Smart Recruiters of Workday, and we show up in Zoom or Meet or Teams. We want the interviewer to actually follow the plan, ask these questions, cover the right content. Let's not make them open up Greenhouse to see that. Let's bring that. I'll share my screen because I can't show this while we're on this Zoom. But we bring them right into the experience of I'm in my Zoom, I'm in my Google Meet, and I literally have those questions right in front of me as an assistant guiding me through that process. Now, of course, I don't have to take furious notes. I can just focus on the conversation because it's being recorded and transcribed. But I'm removing the cognitive load of remembering what am I supposed to cover here. Like, let's make sure that we actually run that structured, consistent conversation every single time. And then we give you this kind of magical output. We run an hour-long systems design. We capture the entire process, the screen share of that technical workflow, the entire transcript, and then we get AI delivering back exactly what we need from that conversation. So in this instance, we've designed a custom AI notes template for a systems design interview where we want to know Have we prompted the candidate to answer? You know, what was the prompt for this exercise? What questions did the candidate ask originally? You know, what were the elements of the candidate's solution? How do they talk about database architecture and scaling and speed? And that's all literally customizable by a template that I can build myself. We can also have like a whole host of off-the-shelf templates, like a basic Q&A, or even one that kind of maps directly to your scorecard. And we bring this directly into your ATS. So the workflow that most folks have is actually not coming to this screen. Right? Think about your interviewers, your hiring managers who are, you know, they're not power users. They're just using this, you know, a couple times a week or maybe once a quarter. They're not coming to BrightHire. They're coming to their applicant tracking system. And we're doing all the hard work for them. We're bringing that interview directly into the ATS. We're giving them a super handy button where they can take that and literally fill out all the feedback with really fun confetti and bring substantive, concrete evidence directly into exactly where they need it, right, in their scorecard. Now, in this case, right, we had that systems design interview. So kind of one big key takeaways tab here. You can also see in this case in Ashby, here we might have like several questions that we were supposed to answer. Right. And now our AI is smart enough to be able to say, well, if we want to answer those questions, let's take the interview that we ran, let's systematize the AI notes according to those questions, and now allow me to import directly on those fields to answer the questions that we need to along the way. Right. And so again, we're just trying to remove the hard work from interviewers, allow them to do the important work, you know, give their judgment, deliver great candidate experience, sell really effectively, and not have to be stenographers during the interview. There's a whole set of power user tools back in BrightHire for recruiters. Like I might want to share a clip of an interview that I thought was amazing with a hiring manager to calibrate really quickly, and I can like easily do that. I might want to actually query, you know, how did Riley talk about, you know, scaling? Because I don't want to go back through this and watch it, and I can literally pull up using AI, right, a summary of that particular topic as I just query the conversation over time. And you can see there's like a handful of like quick actions here, writing an advancement email, a rejection email, a warm email, right? So like I have all this information completely at my fingertips in a super flexible way. Again, 95, I mean, Jeff can speak to this, 95% of your users are not going to use this, right? They're going to go fill out their scorecard with one click and it's going to be super easy and seamless and delightful. But these power features are here for recruiters to help them be more productive and get exactly the information they need. Like think about how many times a hiring manager asked a recruiter, hey, like, why did that person leave that last job? Or what happened about this? And they didn't have the notes. Like, let me go back, query this really quick, pull it up and be super confident. So we bring all that directly into the scorecard. And then we run like a full interview loop with a candidate like Riley. Now we have all of his interviews captured on BrightHire. So now we can run a really effective debrief. We can go back and see what were all the topics that we covered in his interviews. We can have a set of searchable highlights that we can pull back to see all the moments that matter. We're even capturing important moments that might have happened in that interview loop that like the recruiter wasn't in the room, but definitely wants to know that Riley's in early stage conversations with 6 companies and is hoping to start by mid-March. Like, let's put that at the fingertips of the recruiter so we can manage a delightful candidate experience and be on top of closing every single time. All right, so now we're running better debriefs, keeping recruiters informed, and then we're up-leveling the entire team over time. So all of these interviews then become incredibly valuable data. And so we can start to measure a whole host of dynamics about your interview process that you literally can't see today. I mean, even simple stuff like, are we showing up on time? You know, like who is not showing up on time? I got to hold them accountable. Great. Now I know, right? And so whether it's how much time we're giving candidates to speak or you know, how many questions we're asking, or whether we give candidates the opportunity to ask questions themselves, we can roll all of this up into what we call an interview quality score. Totally customizable by you. You can set the metrics that you care about and thresholds that you care about, kind of roll all that up and track that over time. And you can see, again, we sync to the ATS here. So this is all kind of like slice and dice by department, position, interviewer, stage, very, very, very granular. So knowing what's going on is one part, but then improving is, you know, ultimately the game here. And so we think about how do we train and coach and enable, you know, resource constrained teams to do that. And so that lands on our training, right? So imagine there are people out there doing great stuff, right? Running great interviews that we want people to be shadowing, but we don't want to do all the work to coordinate that. Let's say, hey, we want to coach and up-level folks on how to run the software engineer systems design exercise. Well, here's a couple clips or interviews of that we can literally assign out to a set of trainees, have them watch, answer a set of assessment questions, and really ensure that we are up-leveling the entire team because we're replicating what our best interviewers do. Think about like a bar raiser program, or an instance where only 5 people are qualified to run this interview, but you need 15 in order to hit the hiring number. Like, we can't have that be a bottleneck. This feature becomes very valuable in terms of upskilling the entire interview team. So that was a lot. A lot of surface area on BrightHire. I'll come back to just like the overview, right? End to end, from creating and optimizing job descriptions, turning those into structured interview plans, guiding interviewers in real time, capturing that context and bringing it into the ATS, and then giving TA leaders a set of tools to up-level the process with insights and training over time. That's BrightHire. Yeah, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to walk it through. And now I'm going to shut up and let Jeff talk about how it actually works, because that'll probably be way more interesting than me. But yeah, Jeff, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, and feel free to peel the layers back here. I'll keep it kind of high level to start, but yeah. So I mentioned earlier on my call, or on my intro, that I've been using it for probably the entire 2 years that I've been at Abnormal, and I think when the impetus for it was starting out at Abnormal. It's for those of you who kind of don't know what we do, maybe just setting some context there. It's a 6-year-old AI native cybersecurity company. It's based out of San Francisco, and it was founded 2018. It's there's a couple pieces of it that make it really ripe for growth. One is that we started in email security. So email's still the #1 business application that's used. It's also still the #1 sort of entry point and vulnerability for businesses from a cybersecurity standpoint. So huge total addressable market, and cloud native architecture makes it super easy to deploy and use and scale. And so for those reasons, over the past 6 years, I think on average, the last number I checked, we've been growing on average about 97% year over year. Early years, of course, when you grow from 10 to 50, that's a huge number. So we've kind of evened out over the past couple of years. This year, FY25, we're going to grow about somewhere between probably 58-65%. So we're in that kind of rarefied air where we've learned some really tough lessons. We hired some great talent early on that really set a high bar for especially amongst the leadership team, for the type of talent that we knew we wanted to hire going forward. And when I joined, there were a couple of things that were pretty obvious. We had a very involved and active board, and from the investor level, so group of investors and board members that really believed that if you want to do great things, you got to hire great people. I know everyone says that, but I've been in enough companies to know there's some that actually kind of walk the walk and some that don't. And the other side is we had an executive team that was really well aligned on just kind of the value and impact of quality hiring and recruiting. So those two things, I think, are kind of all blended together. We've got a company that's growing a whole bunch. We've got a really involved board, and we have an executive team that believes in the power of really good recruiting. All that's wonderful. Where for anyone out there that's listening, and Teddy, I'm sure you've worked with enough customers kind of in this phase. When you've been successful and you've grown year over year, I think in engineering they call it technical debt, but yeah, you've got some stuff you've got to pay down, right? It's like you're moving fast, you're hiring fast, and we were in that same position. So when I joined, there was a lot of wonderful work that had been done, but there were a ton of questions around just scalability, standardized processes, candidate experience, just kind of like not even just the metrics and data themselves, but like what's the inputs to that? What are we using for our systems, and can we even trust the data that we're seeing? Signal testing, and how are we surfacing the signal in interviews, and just really, I think, normal stuff for a company that's in that position that's been growing really fast. And so we needed to identify some sort of single source of truth, some sort of platform that we could say, all right, like where are our kind of qualitative gaps in the process, but then also we were living in the same world that you all were living in 2022 when I joined, which was, I think, Teddy, you called it out. It's like, how do we do more with less? And so I didn't I didn't know interview intelligence tools existed, and sort of embarrassed to say that. But I didn't realize this type of platform did. And so when I first met Teddy and first got demoed by BrightHire, I I was skeptical that it could help solve a lot of these problems, or at least kind of put us on the path to identifying what really the root cause was. But yeah, really happy to share some of the maybe the one or two clicks down, as far as rollout and some of the value that we've gotten from it since then.
I'm particularly interested in rollout with the founding team that have scaled to like a half decent size, and then you've
Yeah.
come. We actually, I want to look inside the black box of an interview and like see what goes on. What did you have founders buy in immediately there, or did they take some convincing to have an AI tool?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's not the conquer the world story that Teddy would probably appreciate, but it's, the true answer is, we made some assumptions. Like when I first did the demo, I was thinking probably what most people think. It's like, people are going to be recording, and what are candidates going to think, and what are the executives going to think, and who's going to adopt this? And it was kind of the normal worries that you have, even when you do see the values downstream that you're going to get from it. The approach that we wanted to take, and we kind of kicked the tires a little bit around how do we want to do this, and who do we think is going to most naturally want to adopt this, who's going to see the value and buy into it. And our thinking was that the go-to-market teams would, and we had talked to some of the C-level executives and VPs, and they shared some of their pain points with me around like, geez, I don't even know how some of these people are getting to me. Like, how are they getting to a final interview? And so we really thought that was going to be the area most ripe for adoption. What we quickly learned is that actually the engineering team really picked up quickly the value of being able to see what was happening in interviews and then being able to quantify a lot of it. And so they were actually our early adopters. We were a little bit surprised by that. We kind of picked and chose, a few different leaders from across the business, mostly people who were needing to hire a lot on their teams. So they were willing, they were more open to what are the tools I can use to do this because I need help. I need to hire quickly, but I can't sacrifice quality. And so once we got it into the hands of a couple of those early adopters on the engineering side, we really just tried to play that kind of crossing the chasm game of like, how do we make sure, and I have some great people on the ops team and on our recruiting enablement team who really worked with BrightHire, and it was like, how can we take the best of what's happening here and start to create this early advocacy for it? And it was very successful, especially on the engineering side. It took some time, but we got to that critical mass where those engineering leaders were then sharing the value without us even sort of poking and prodding them to. And then we started having the more lagging adopters come to us and say, like, why am I not set up on BrightHire yet? So it was like, then there was a whole other set of questions we had to answer around like, sorry, like you weren't chosen in the beginning, but yeah. So kind of a phased approach, I guess you would say, and not without its kind of kinks in it as far as lessons that we learned more internally. But yeah, been really successful, and now is sort of a high demand. Like now people come to us and frankly they're pissed when BrightHire doesn't join. They're like, oh, this, for whatever reason, like maybe this one candidate didn't want to be recorded and da da da. So then they get frustrated because they aren't using it. So it's been a really successful rollout by and large.
And what kind of support was there from BrightHire with the implementation and rollout?
Yeah, the support is probably the thing that I was most impressed with, just I remember kind of pushing Teddy on the demo call, or maybe it was like the second call, because you want to know, okay, you all are, we knew what size we were. We weren't like a Pepsi, where if we get all butthurt about something, Teddy's not going to drop everything he's doing and like fly to San Francisco and say like, what can I do to make sure, this account doesn't churn. So I just wanted to have a realistic idea of like, how are you going to help us, and what does the product roadmap kind of look like? Because we're going to learn things along the way and think, gee, it would be cool if X, Y, Z. So I've been really impressed. We've got an external Slack channel that we use, and we're big Slack users at Abnormal. So We have an external Slack channel that that has our CSM in it. I think Teddy and Ben are both in there, probably getting irritated by all the questions we're asking. Yeah, no, it's been great, and get to meet with Abhi, the head of product there, and get some of like the beta testing, and he'll preview certain technologies like candidate alerts. We got a really early demo of before it went live to the general pop, and so just really cool insights into kind of what's coming, but also what could we be doing better.
Jeff, I remember you said like in the early days, maybe a quarter or two, and you had like an A/B test on recruiters who like had BrightHire and didn't have BrightHire. I thought that was like a really cool way to help folks see the value.
Yeah, and funny enough, that actually wasn't that long ago that we ran that, and so we already had a really good adoption rate, and there was a good sort of general groundswell or whatever you want to call it around, like recruiters got it. Recruiters understood the value of it, but we had a new recruiter. We were kind of reconfiguring our recruiter onboarding because in the last 6 months we've hired, I think our recruiting org has grown from like 17 to, by the end of this year, we're going to be at 38. So it's grown quite a bit. So we knew that we needed to get better about how we were onboarding recruiters with BrightHire and not just have it be like another piece of the tech stack that, oh yeah, that thing that like joins my interviews. And so, yeah, we did this. We had a G&A recruiter who recently joined in, I want to say March, or I think it was April actually. And we basically just set up like she's been super excited about BrightHire even since before she joined. She was like, I've seen them at, LinkedIn Talent Connect and like da-da-da, and she was all fired up. And so we were excited to get her to be, we were thinking, okay, well, how can we start to actually quantify the impact of just like the efficiency? Because we're always looking, as an AI native company, we're always looking like, how are we actually walking the walk and using AI internally? Because we're pushing it externally, right? So she jumped in. We did a sample size of, I think it was about 130 or 140 interviews. And that piece that you were showing earlier about the importing the notes directly from the interview assistant into Greenhouse, that's our ATS. We ran an A/B test, and this new G&A recruiter, we kind of set them up against like the historic like veteran recruiter that's doing a Google Doc, and even if they had already adopted BrightHire, we just kind of like let's see what if you're using a Google Doc, you're still doing the kind of the chicken scratch and then copying and pasting it, and then going back at the end of your day where you've done 6 interviews and trying to be like, well, who the hell said what, and what did they mean by that? I don't have a recording for it. So we set that up to try to really get some clear quantitative and qualitative value. And what we saw that was the BrightHire recruiter, we'll call him, the newer recruiter, was only spending, I think in those 140 interviews, it was only like 8 or 9 hours over that entire span. It was a course of about 3 months, only spending about 8 or 9 hours on feedback. Whereas the veteran recruiter, it was somewhere between like 37 and 38 hours that they were spending. So it was almost an entire week of productivity over the course of 3 months that the veteran recruiter was spending just like trying to go back and figure out what they meant by something, and then you think about all the other kind of value props that you get from that. They were spending time just sort of like this, right? Typing away during the interview. They didn't have like that quality recall that we want from recruiters. So like I said, at the end of the day, they've done 5 interviews. They're trying to remember who said what 6, 7 hours ago. So it really is like, it was multiple areas of value for us, just from like recruiter capacity, candidate experience, quality of interview, all that kind of stuff.
It's awesome. And the quality of interview metric is a really interesting thing to see. I like that a lot. What's, out of curiosity, Jeff, how do you use that at Abnormal?
So we don't have a metric that's sort of distilled down into a quality. We haven't started using that function just yet. What we've been using more so is we look at, like, from a quality of hire standpoint, we look at it through the training modules and playlists that we've built. And so that to me is like, this probably dates me a little bit, but I mean, I came up in recruiting when you were sitting in a bullpen. was like it was very sales style. It was you were next to someone, you were hearing the great stuff or the stupid crap they were saying about the company, and you're like, no, don't say it that way. And I think any recruiting manager can sympathize with that. And so now that for the last 4 years, like kind of most people out there have been in a distributed model, and part of Abnormal's EVP is that we are fully remote, and so it's been challenging for my leaders and myself of just knowing like what's happening behind the curtain. How do we find those coachable moments where like, hey, I hear you saying this, that's awesome, but we want to make sure we don't whatever it is. Like, how do we talk about equity? How do we talk about growth trajectory? How do we talk about competitive intelligence and position in the market? Just all those things that if you're sitting in a bullpen with someone and you can hear them saying, that's one thing. But now we have like a scalable system of record where we can go back in and do one-on-one coaching with it, and then use those clips also, the good ones, use those and then build enablement and training for new recruiters that onboard, or even interviewers who are just maybe not on the recruiting team, but new hiring managers who are coming in and wanting to know, hey, how is the recruiting team pitching my org? How are you talking about it? So yeah, a couple different ways that we really are leveraging that qualitative piece that have been super helpful.
It's interesting to hear the L&D standpoint from the recruiting side as well, because when you see a tool like BrightHire, you instantly think, oh, it's going to make interviewers up their game, and that's a big L&D point for them. But you're so right with the recruiters as well, being in a remote world, not sitting next to someone and hearing them on the phone, being able to tap into them and use those as coaching points is super valuable. And what would be your one like hot tip on BrightHire if someone here is going to start using it in their organization?
My one hot tip, yeah, it is. I think it kind of depends on what your position in the interview process is, as far as if you're going to make me do one hot tip. I think as a recruiting leader, it's my ability to like the value it provides for me. One of the values is it allows me to still be really close to our hiring process. And the more that we grow and the more layers of complexity and the more matrixed our organization becomes, like we're growing in EMEA and we're growing in APAC, and we now have, a head of people in APAC. And so those different layers of kind of matrix leadership, it really allows me to still at any time go in and I'll hear kind of a piece of anecdotal feedback that's like, we're really having trouble attracting, staff level engineers or for our ML openings in Singapore. It's like, that's a really specific thing. I could go spend 9 hours talking to like all the different recruiters, all the hiring managers. What do you think anecdotally? What do you think's happening? And then you're kind of trying to piece together this puzzle of like, who's full of it, who doesn't know what they're talking about, who's really sharp. And so I think just from a hot tip standpoint, like when Teddy asked, I can't remember what the prompt was that you put in there, Teddy, for the AI assistant to help with, but it was like, how did Riley talk about such and such?
Yeah.
But being able to pull just like 5 random staff level engineer interviews from Singapore, from systems design or interactive coding challenge, and being like, how is this candidate talking about X? And being able to just do that in like 15, 20 minutes and get some sort of like, I feel closer to it. I'm getting almost a real-time experience of it, even though it isn't technically in real time, but I'm getting that sort of, I was there, I was a fly on the wall. And then I can go back to the people who can help me kind of systemically solve that problem instead of just, well, I think that, she thinks this type of answer. So hopefully that answers your question, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. We've had a question through from Rhonda, which is, I guess, for you, Teddy. But are there any examples that you have of how companies are using the quality of interview, I think or how are clients using it for quality of hire?
Jeff, I'll defer to you on this one first. Like when you think about your implementation of BrightHire, how is it impacting the quality of the inputs, the structure of the interview, the debrief, decision making, and how are you thinking about tracking quality over time?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Rhonda means like an actual like specific quality of hire metric, because I know that's one of the kind of the I don't know those it's something we're always chasing. I feel like in the past decade or so and I've built quality of hire metrics at 3 or 4 different companies, and there's always that age-old question like, was it a good hire or was it a bad hire? Was it do we have a really good manager that just like managed this person up and built their skill set, or was it maybe a bad manager who didn't provide the right ecosystem for them to thrive in? So yeah, I think we're probably in the same boat as a lot of people out there as far as building that one metric to rule them all. But as far as my experience with BrightHire, so what we've started to do is work with our people operations team and specifically our chief people officer, and look at, as we're trying to identify, let's say that we see like an uptick in attrition. So if we see like India, we've been there, we've built our India office over the past 14 months, and we've done some postmortems on when people leave. And what's been really helpful to be able to do is we obviously do the classic exit interview, and then that's usually with HR, people operations. We do some of the 360 feedback from like managers, and we look at their 90-day onboarding and some of the qualitative feedback that was given, and maybe if they were part of a performance cycle, what were their performance feedback. But being able to actually go in and look at, did we miss something in the interview process? Is there something that we sacrificed on? What was the feedback? And being able to do that in a way that, like to Teddy's to the point about being able to query in there, not having to watch 6 hours of interviews to do that, but being able to actually go in and see, oh, well, Teddy flagged this when they during the interactive coding challenge, and why didn't we dig in on that? Like, why did we sacrifice, asking those questions at that time? So I think from a quality standpoint, just the ability to go back in and not have to try to remember offhand something that happened 3, 6 months ago, that's just been an incredible value for us.
For sure. Great. Thanks very much for that. A question then for you, Teddy, would be, we've obviously seen someone's AI note taker join the call today, likely, but it'd be interesting to hear from you. What's your take on BrightHire versus an AI note taker?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess first, like, there's just the breadth, right? Like, we're not just an AI note taker, right? There's everything in this end-to-end platform, from job descriptions and interview plans to the real-time guidance, and then insights and training. And so in that respect, I think a lot of what Jeff referenced in terms of the things that have been actually really valuable for him to get the job done, whether it's recruiter productivity or quality of hire, or onboarding new interviewers confidently, is not just about having captured notes, right? It's about the architecture kind of around that. And then I'd say, if a team is serious about getting, quality of hire in the right place, they need to get their entire company on board, because the process is not just going to be, hey, if we get recruiter screens, then that's going to change the game for us. It's, interviewers and hiring managers, and rolling out an AI note taker, even if that's the core of the solution, to that entire population, as Jeff described, is not just like we turn it on. It's like we do a thoughtful rollout, and we have the right role-based access controls, and we set up the data deletion pieces. And there's a lot of unsexy stuff that Jeff, that we didn't talk about, syncing to Greenhouse or to Ashby on the recruiting operations side, that makes a massive difference in terms of the ability to confidently roll out. I mean, even down to something nuanced, like, we want to capture this role, but not this stage of the interview process. Like, that stuff matters, right? And so giving teams that flexibility matters a lot. And then I'd say, like, the deep integrations into the systems that teams use today, right? How we show up in Greenhouse, a scorecard, or Ashby in a scorecard, or even an overlay on a Workday or an iSIMS or Smart Recruiters. How we show up and show you the interview plan in Zoom or Google Meet or Teams. How you can actually run a phone screen on BrightHire, which you can't do with an AI note taker that joins a video interview. But we have teams that run tens of thousands of phone screens every month. So there's a whole host of things that we've built from the ground up, because we've always known that we want to serve talent acquisition teams. That's personally, both my parents were in HR for 30 years. Like, I've worked at LinkedIn and CEB doing HR research. This is like, you don't build an HR tech company because you want to make like $10 billion. You build it because you're passionate about it. We knew from the ground up that we wanted to serve this kind of use case and community. And so we made, I don't know, 10,000 product decisions very specific to be able to do that kind of beautifully.
Nice. And are there any limitations of the product right now, would you say? And if there are, what are you doing about it?
I'll let Jeff give the real answer to that because he'll probably give a more honest answer. I mean, I'll say from my vantage point, there are definitely things that people want the product to do that it doesn't do. Some things that it may never do, and some things that it certainly doesn't do yet, right? So there are interesting, like when we serve teams at scale, they're like, look, we're hiring hundreds or thousands of like the same role. We're running the same kind of interview again and again. Can you just like tell us what a good answer is? Like you should be able to, AI should be able to know. Right? We're not there yet. Maybe someday, but we're not using AI to pass judgment on the quality of an answer and say, yes, this is a good answer, or no, that's a bad answer, or you should probe more deeply there. Human in the loop, like hiring is human, and we try to empower people in that respect. I think another area where we have a limitation or kind of a gap is in this market right now, which shifted to really kind of an employer's market more so, is there's just massive inbound flow for applications. And a real challenge for recruiters is I don't have time to scan through 1,000 resumes, right? And so we haven't solved that problem yet. There's other platforms out there that have solved that problem. Those resume screening and pre-assessment sort of space. I think it's a space that's kind of really ripe for disruption via AI. We haven't touched that yet. So those are areas that like we just hear from teams all the time. Hey, can you solve this? Can you solve this? And we haven't quite extended into yet. So that's at least in terms of like where I see the market right now and where we have limitations. Jeff, I don't know if you see like in the core use case other stuff that you wish that we were doing or things that you felt like you've had to work around.
Yeah. My honest answer is there's been a couple times where we've like wished something was there, and I don't know if we're just like we're really in lockstep with your product team or like what it is, but one of the ones was actually having something like BrightHire Plan, and being able to have more of kind of an end to end, because it's one of those things where once what is it like you give a mouse a cookie type of thing. It's like when we started to sort of take for granted some of just the efficiency gains you get from like the AI note taker and just some of those one-click import and all that kind of stuff, then you start asking like the other questions. And well, I think it was probably back in December or something, Teddy, you and Ben and I and the team and my ops team got together and we're like, hey, we're like seeing different data. Like, tell me what's going on there. And it was actually, I think it was, as any deep dive into data is, it's sort of labor intensive at the start. But one of the reasons I was appreciative of it is everyone at BrightHire seemed to actually care. It wasn't just like, oh, there's that like 800-person company that doesn't like the data, so let's just like ghost them. But the other thing when that data question arose is my ops people were looking into it, and it started to bring up really good questions about the habits of recruiters and how they were scheduling interviews, how it was getting logged in Greenhouse, what was that level of like fidelity and data hygiene that we were seeing or not seeing between different recruiters. And then we were able to give our CSM some feedback of like, well, here's kind of what we need to see and where we need to like reconcile that. So no glaring gaps from like a functionality standpoint. I think just there's been a couple times where small stuff like that's popped up, but yeah, just been happy with like the response that we've seen. And then also, like I said, sometimes you turn over those stones. It's like and you find there's other things going on. And so it actually led to some good improvements in our just kind of end-to-end SOP of recruiting in general.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Nice. I have one more question, but if any attendees have questions, feel free again to pop them in the chat or in the Q&A. The question I have, are there any privacy or compliance considerations that companies need to take in mind?
Yes. Absolutely. Whether it's under GDPR or CCPA or just thinking about like candidate consent, data privacy, things like right to be forgotten or DSARs, right? There's just a whole host of things that you need to get right and be super thoughtful about, especially if you're operating globally. Jeff, I don't know if you have reflections on managing those issues or how we've kind of partnered with you along the way, but the short answer is like yes, absolutely. And again, back to your question on like what's the difference between this and an AI note taker? Like that's a great example of 100 decisions we've made and investments we've made and ways we've architected the product to be compliant. And I think even from a starting point, when we started BrightHire, we codified, a set of values like every company does. And the first one was put candidates first. Because, well, they don't pay us. So we have to codify like our commitment to that stakeholder in some other really meaningful way. And also if we don't do right by candidates, then like nobody will use the product, right? And it's the right thing to do. And so from that commitment then was born a set of product decisions and investments, like SOC 2 and other stuff like that to make sure that we show up in the right ways.
Yeah, that's been my experience is again, I probably bug Nicole and my team might bug Nicole more than the ad work. We might be high maintenance in that respect, but because we are a high growth company right now, I think we had a first in seat in 7 different countries. And that was just over the last 6 months. So going into countries, especially in Europe, where like privacy laws can be completely different. So going into France, going into the Netherlands, going into the Nordics, opening up APAC and making first in seat hires over there. It's been a tremendous amount of learning for me. And, we all love compliance is not like the sexiest thing. It's not like what you want to sit around and have like, chat about over coffee or tea. But it's been really important for us to learn because that was one of the first things I asked about as well. And I think my ops team did also when we got demoed is like, what's your opt-out rate? Like, do people actually not want to be recorded or not want their information stored? And we've been really, really happy that our opt-out rate is, I think, to a percentage point, exactly what Teddy quoted 2 years ago during the demo. So it's been really, really low. I think we're at 4 or 6% is our opt-out rate. And so been very successful in that regard, but also just yes, we have a leadership team that keeps candidate experience really, really high and understands that, especially with an emerging talent brand, that's like how you're going to go win top talent is not because someone's like, oh, Abnormal Security, I've always wanted to work for them. It's what sort of experience can you give them throughout the process that is a differentiator. And so built a lot of different templates and candidate communications that really tries to articulate that. And then I think candidates feel that when they do interview. And I'll even ask, I'm like, hey, so BrightHire is here with us. Like, what do you think about that? It's been great getting that feedback. And I would say overwhelmingly positive has been the sentiment we've gotten.
That's awesome. Awesome to hear. We've not had any more questions through. So if people do have questions, Teddy, where's the best place for them to go?
So you can find us at brighthire.com. That's our website. You can find me on LinkedIn. My co-founder, Ben Sesser, is also very active on LinkedIn, in particular sharing kind of aggregate insights that we pull from the data, sharing really interesting things around like candidate motivations or how interviews might differ between like male and female candidates. So we're doing a lot of really interesting kind of data science work at scale, and that all comes through him. But brighthire.com is the place to go to see the product, grab a demo, learn more. Pretty simple.
Awesome. Well, thanks both so much. I thought that was a super informative session. It's awesome to see the impact that BrightHire is having at Abnormal, and that it can have on so many recruiting organizations globally. For everyone watching this, by the way, we have a special offer through Hire, which is 10% off your first year contract for new customers with BrightHire. So ensure that you mention that when you're speaking with Teddy in the future, or if you go through the brighthire.com website. And this will also be recorded and saved in the Hire HQ hub, which is hirehq.com. That's our content hub for all things TA. It includes webinars, podcasts, and more as well. We've had one comment. I think it's just really good insight.
Customers, by the way, Jeff. New customers.
New customers. Sorry, Jeff. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for attending, and we will leave it there.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for having me. Take care.